My sister stood up at my 35th birthday dinner to announce she was pregnant with my husband's baby. She thought it would destroy me. She didn't know that while she was planning her announcement, I was planning a federal investigation. And I brought the receipts. Before we dive into the story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a part. And let me know in the comments below. Have you ever stayed in a relationship hoping the other person would change? Let's get started. The scene opens in the low, golden ambient light of Maison Rouge. The camera focuses on the condensation on a champagne flute, then pulls back to reveal the tension in Naomi's eyes despite her smile. The crystal chandeliers of Maison Rouge didn't just provide light, they seemed to drip opulence onto the tables below, casting a fractured, shimmering glow over the city's most exclusive private dining room. For Naomi Richardson, the room felt less like a celebration and more like a beautifully decorated cage. She sat at the head of the mahogany table, her spine steel straight against the velvet chair. She was turning 35, a milestone that was supposed to mark the peak of her life. A successful career, a wealthy husband, a supportive family. But as she smoothed the fabric of her burgundy silk dress, the only thing she felt was the cold weight of the secret she had been carrying for 6 agonizing months. To her right sat Alexander, her husband, the man who had promised to love her until death parted them, but who currently seemed more interested in the glowing screen of his phone than the woman he had married. He was handsome, undeniably so, with the kind of sharp jawline and tailored suit that commanded attention in boardrooms. But Naomi knew the rot that lived beneath that polish. She watched him tap a quick message, his thumb hovering over the screen for a fraction of a second too long, a nervous tick she had only recently learned to decode. Across from them sat Brianna, Naomi's younger sister. Brianna, who was currently laughing too loudly at a joke their mother had made, her green cocktail dress slipping slightly off one shoulder. There was a feverish energy to Brianna tonight, a frantic sparkle in her eyes that Naomi recognized instantly. It was the look of someone preparing to light a fuse. Naomi took a slow, deliberate sip of her water, the ice clinking softly against the glass, a sound that seemed deafening in the lull of conversation. 30 guests surrounded them. Alexander's business partners, Robert Chin and Michael Foster, were discussing market trends, oblivious to the fact that their host was a liability. Naomi's parents were beaming, proud of their daughters, proud of the wealthy son-in-law, proud of the facade. Naomi felt a pang of genuine sorrow for them. They were good people who equated financial success with moral fortitude. They had no idea that tonight, their carefully curated world was going to burn. Naomi reached for her champagne glass. It was time. She needed to take control of the pacing before Brianna did. She tapped the glass with a silver spoon, the sharp ring cutting through the low hum of chatter. "If I could have everyone's attention," Naomi began, her voice practiced and melodic. She stood up, commanding the room not with volume, but with a sudden intense stillness. "I want to thank you all for coming. 35 is a strange age. You're old enough to have a history, but young enough to still believe you can change your future." She caught Alexander's eye. For a moment, he looked panic-stricken, as if he sensed the predator lurking behind her smile. But then, the moment was shattered. Actually, the interruption came from across the table. Brianna stood up abruptly, her chair legs screeching against the marble floor like a banshee. The sound made several guests wince. Brianna's chest was heaving, her hands trembling where they gripped the table edge. She looked wild, beautiful, and dangerous. "I have an announcement," Brianna declared, her voice shrill, cutting through the elegant atmosphere. "I'm sorry, Naomi. I know it's your birthday. But I couldn't wait another second. The love in this room. It just inspired me." Naomi slowly lowered her glass. She didn't sit down. She simply watched, her face a mask of polite curiosity, though her heart was hammering a war rhythm against her ribs. She saw Alexander freeze. The color drained from his face so fast he looked like a wax figure. He reached out a hand slightly, as if to physically pull Brianna back into her chair, but it was too late. "I'm pregnant," Brianna announced, bringing a hand to rest dramatically on her flat stomach. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Naomi's mother clapped her hands to her mouth, tears already springing to her eyes. "Oh, Brianna! A baby!" But Brianna wasn't finished. She turned her gaze directly toward Naomi. It was a look of pure, distilled malice disguised as sisterly affection. A cruel smile played on her lips, a smile that said, "I win." And Brianna paused for effect, savoring the destruction she was about to unleash. "Alexander is the father. We're a family now. We're finally going to be a real family." The silence that followed was absolute. It was a vacuum, sucking the air out of the room. A fork clattered onto a plate. Naomi's mother let out a strangled sound, clutching her chest. Alexander's business partners exchanged looks of horrified confusion. Christina, Naomi's best friend, started to rise from her seat, her face twisted in protective fury, but Naomi made a microscopic motion with her hand. "Stay down." "I know this is hard, Naomi," Brianna continued, her voice dripping with a sickly sweet sympathy that made Naomi's skin crawl. "We tried to fight it. We really did. But we've been in love for over a year. Some connections are just cosmic. You're strong, though. You've always been the strong one. You'll understand, eventually. We can all move forward honestly now." Alexander looked like he wanted to vomit. "Brianna," he hissed, his voice cracking. "Not now. Jesus, not here." "When, Alexander?" Brianna shot back, her voice rising. "When she's 40. We have a child coming. We can't live in the shadows anymore." Naomi looked at them. Really looked at them. Her husband, a coward crumbling in his designer suit. Her sister, a narcissist confusing betrayal with romance. She felt the eyes of the 30 guests burning into her. They expected tears. They expected a scream, a faint, a scene of hysterical victimhood. They were waiting for the humiliated wife to flee the room. Instead, Naomi smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a grandmaster who had just watched their opponent walk into a trap set 20 moves ago. "Well," Naomi said, her voice steady, clear and terrifyingly calm. "That is certainly a surprise." She picked up her champagne glass again. The bubbles danced in the light. "I'd like to propose a toast," Naomi said. "Naomi, you don't have to do this," Christina whispered loudly, thinking her friend had snapped. "To revelations," Naomi said, her voice projecting to the back of the room, locking eyes with Alexander. "To the truth finally coming into the light. And to the end of masquerades." She took a long, deliberate sip of the champagne. She set the glass down with a precise clink. "You know, Brianna," Naomi said, turning her attention to her sister, "I actually appreciate your timing. It's impeccable. Because I also have an announcement." She reached down into her designer handbag, which had been sitting by her feet like a loaded weapon. "I've known about the affair for 6 months," Naomi said casually, as if discussing the weather. "Since February 14th. Valentine's Day. The receipts Alexander forgot to delete? The ones from the Grand View Hotel? I found them. I hired a private investigator the next morning." Brianna's smug expression faltered. Alexander looked up, terror flashing in his eyes. "So," Naomi continued, her hand closing around the thick manila envelope inside her bag, "while you two were playing house and planning this little dramatic reveal, I was planning something else entirely." She pulled the envelope out and dropped it onto the table. It landed with a heavy, ominous thud. "Alexander, I'm divorcing you. My lawyers filed the papers this morning. You'll be served officially tomorrow." She paused, letting the word settle. "But that's the boring part," she added, her eyes gleaming. "The interesting part is what I found while I was looking for proof of your infidelity. You see, when you dig for dirt, you usually find mud. But I found a landfill." Close up on the manila envelope as it hits the table. The camera pans rapidly across the faces of the guests. Shock, confusion, and the dawning realization that the power dynamic has completely shifted. The heavy thud of the envelope hitting the marble table echoed like a gunshot in a canyon. For a few seconds, no one moved. Alexander stared at the packet as if it contained anthrax. His hands were shaking so violently that he had to grip the edge of the table to steady them. "Divorce," Alexander whispered, the word feeling foreign in his mouth. "Naomi, you can't. We can talk about this. I can explain." "You can explain it to your lawyers," Naomi cut him off, her voice devoid of any warmth. "But as I said, the divorce is just the appetizer. The main course is in the other envelopes." Naomi reached back into her bag. She pulled out 4 more thick, bound folders. She didn't hand them to Alexander. Instead, she walked around the table, her heels clicking rhythmically on the floor. She placed one in front of Robert Chin, one in front of Michael Foster, one in front of her father, and the last one, she slid across the table to her mother. "What is this?" Robert Chin asked, his brow furrowed. He was a serious man, the lead investor in Richardson Industries, and he had no patience for domestic drama. "Open it, Robert," Naomi urged gently. "Page 3 is particularly enlightening." Robert flipped the folder open. He adjusted his glasses, scanning the document. Silence stretched taut across the room, thin and vibrating. Suddenly, Robert's head snapped up. His face had gone from confused to thunderous. "Is this authentic?" Robert demanded, his voice low and dangerous. "Verified by forensic accountants," Naomi replied. "Bank statements, wire transfers, and the corresponding emails from Alexander's private server. He's been embezzling from Richardson Industries for 3 years, Robert. Approximately $12 million funneled through shell companies in the Caymans and Singapore." "You're lying," Alexander shouted, finally finding his voice. He scrambled to his feet, knocking his chair over. "She's lying. She's crazy with jealousy. Robert, don't listen to her." "Sit down, Alexander," Robert barked, not even looking at him. He was still reading, his finger tracing a line of transaction codes. The transaction on March 15th. The expansion fund, wire. It didn't go to the Singapore office. It went to a holding company called Apex LLC. And here. Robert flipped a page. Here is the incorporation document for Apex LLC, listing Alexander Richardson as the sole beneficiary. Robert looked up, his eyes cold. "You stole from us. You stole from me." "It was a loan," Alexander stammered, sweat beading on his forehead. "I was going to pay it back. I just had some liquidity issues." $12 million is not a liquidity issue, Alexander, Naomi interjected smoothly. "It's a federal crime. Which is why I've already sent digital copies of everything in those folders to the SEC and the FBI." The color drained from the room. Alexander looked like he had been physically struck. You went to the FBI?" "This morning," Naomi confirmed. "They were very interested. I imagine they'll be wanting to speak with you quite soon." She turned her attention to the other side of the table. Her sister, Brianna, had sunk back into her chair, looking small and terrified. The bravado of her pregnancy announcement had evaporated, replaced by the grim reality of her situation. "And don't think I forgot about you, Brianna," Naomi said, her voice softening into something pitying and lethal. "Mom, Dad, check the last section of your folders." Her father's hands were trembling as he turned the pages. He was a proud man, a man who had built a family trust to ensure his daughters would always be safe. As he read the documents Naomi had provided, his face crumpled. "Brianna," he whispered, his voice broken. "Tell me this isn't true." "What?" Brianna squeaked. "What is it?" "The withdrawals," her father said, holding up a bank statement. $300,000 over the last 2 years. Unauthorized withdrawals from the family trust. Signatures forged. I needed it, Brianna stammered, tears streaming down her face now. Real tears, panicked tears. I was going to put it back. I just had some debts. Gambling debts, Naomi clarified for the room. Online poker and sports betting. I have the records from the sites, Brianna. You gambled away Dad's retirement security while sleeping with my husband. That's a lie, Brianna screamed, standing up again. You're just trying to ruin my happiness. You're jealous because I'm having his baby. Jealous. Naomi laughed, a dry, humorless sound. Brianna, look at him. She pointed at Alexander, who was currently being cornered by Robert Chin and Michael Foster. He's going to prison. He's bankrupt. The prenup protects my assets. But you? You have nothing. You're having a baby with a felon who is about to lose everything. I'm not jealous, little sister. I'm protected. Naomi looked around the room one last time. The dinner party was in shambles. Her parents were weeping, huddled over the evidence of their daughter's theft. Alexander was shouting at his investors. Brianna was sobbing into her napkin. It was chaos. It was destruction. And it was exactly what Naomi had planned. I'm leaving now, Naomi announced. The quiet authority of her voice cut through the noise one last time. She picked up her clutch. Christina, are you coming? Try and stop me, Christina said, grabbing her purse and practically leaping from her chair, shooting a glare at Alexander that could have melted steel. Naomi turned and walked toward the double doors. She paused at the threshold, looking back at the wreckage of her former life. Alexander caught her eye across the room. He looked broken, terrified, a man realizing he was standing on a trapdoor that had just opened. Happy birthday to me, Naomi whispered. She pushed the doors open and stepped out into the cool night air. The sounds of the restaurant faded behind her. The street lights of the city flickered on, illuminating the path ahead. For the first time in 6 months, Naomi Richardson took a breath that didn't hurt. She didn't know exactly where she was going, but she knew she wasn't going back. The investigation was over. The evidence was delivered. The revenge was complete. Now the real work, the rebuilding, could begin. 6 months earlier, Naomi Richardson had been living in what she believed was a happy, if somewhat routine marriage. She was the kind of woman who trusted easily, who believed that the vows she took meant as much to her husband as they did to her. Ignorance, she would later realize, was a warm, comfortable blanket. But on a Tuesday in February, that blanket was ripped away forever. It started with something mundane. It was tax season, and Alexander had left early for the office. He had mentioned that the documents their accountant needed were in the bottom drawer of his mahogany desk in the home office. Naomi went in, humming to herself, thinking about dinner plans. She tugged the drawer open, but it stuck. She jiggled it, pulling harder, and the drawer gave way with a jerk. A file folder spilled out, dumping its contents onto the plush carpet. Naomi knelt to pick them up, intending to simply reorganize the mess. There were the usual things: credit card statements, utility bills, insurance papers. But as she stacked them, a small, crinkled slip of paper caught her eye. It was a receipt for the Grand View Hotel. She paused, frowning. The receipt was dated January 14th. She remembered that date clearly because Alexander had told her he was in Chicago for a tech conference. He had even called her that night, complaining about the freezing wind off Lake Michigan. Yet, here was a receipt for the presidential suite at the Grand View, a luxury hotel less than 5 miles from their house, for $700. Her hands began to tremble, a subtle vibration that started in her fingertips and worked its way up her arms. She told herself there was a logical explanation. Maybe he had booked it for a client. Maybe the date on the receipt was wrong. But as she sifted through the rest of the spilled papers, the logical explanations vanished. She found more receipts. Dinners for two at restaurants she had never been to. Jewelry store invoices for a diamond bracelet she had never received. And then the emails. Alexander, usually so careful, had printed out a stack of email correspondence, perhaps to organize his lies, or perhaps simply because he was arrogant enough to think she would never look. One email thread stood out. The subject line was simply, "Missing you." Naomi sat cross-legged on the floor, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She read the sender's name, B. Richardson. Her mind raced. B. Richardson? Who was B. Richardson? A cousin? A distant relative? She clicked through the mental Rolodex of his family. Then, the ice-cold realization hit her. Brianna. Her sister. Naomi felt the room tilt. The air seemed to grow thin. She forced herself to read the words on the page. Last night was incredible. I hate sneaking around like this. When are you going to tell her? I can't wait until we can be a real family. Love. Brianna. Naomi put a hand over her mouth to stifle a scream. The betrayal was so absolute, so comprehensive, that it physically hurt. It wasn't just her husband. It was her sister. The little sister she had protected on the playground, the sister she had helped with homework, the sister she had bailed out of financial trouble more times than she could count. She wanted to burn the house down. She wanted to call Alexander and scream until her throat bled. She wanted to drive to Brianna's apartment and shake her until the truth fell out. But then, a strange cold calm washed over her. It was a survival mechanism, a switch flipping deep inside her brain. If she confronted them now, Alexander would lie. He would gaslight her. He would say she was crazy, that she was misinterpreting things. Worst of all, he would hide the money. She knew Alexander. He was ruthless in business, and he would be ruthless in divorce. If she showed her hand now, she would lose. Naomi took a deep breath. She carefully photographed every document with her phone. She arranged the papers back in the file exactly as they had been, making sure the crinkled receipt was buried in the middle, just as she had found it. She closed the drawer. She stood up, walked out of the office, and locked the door. Then, she went to her computer and searched for divorce lawyers and private investigators. She found Patricia Holmes, a PI with a reputation for discretion and thoroughness. Naomi called her immediately. "I need to know everything," Naomi told Patricia when they met an hour later in a coffee shop 3 towns over. "I need to know where they go, who they see, and how long this has been happening. And I need you to be invisible." "I can do that," Patricia said, taking notes. "But I have to ask, what are you planning to do with this information?" Naomi looked out the window at the gray February sky. The loving wife who had woken up that morning was gone. In her place was someone new. Someone harder, colder, and ready for war. "I don't know yet," Naomi said softly. "But I'm going to make sure they regret the day they decided I was stupid." March was a blur of covert meetings and mounting horror. Naomi quickly realized that dismantling Alexander's life would require more than just photos of him entering hotels. She needed to understand his business. Alexander had always kept his work separate from his home life, claiming it was to protect their time together, but Naomi now knew it was to protect his secrets. She needed an ally who understood the shark tank Alexander swam in. She found one in the most unlikely place. Julian Hayes. Julian was the CEO of Hayes Technology Group, Richardson Industries' biggest competitor. Naomi met him at a charity gala in mid-March. Alexander was on the other side of the room, charming a group of investors, his hand resting casually on the small of Brianna's back, a gesture so bold it made Naomi sick. Naomi approached Julian at the bar. He was a man with intelligent eyes and a reputation for integrity, a rarity in their industry. "Mr. Hayes," Naomi said, offering her hand. "My husband talks about you often. Usually when he's complaining about losing a bid." Julian laughed, a rich, genuine sound. I'll take that as a compliment, Mrs. Richardson. Call me Naomi, she said, dropping her voice. And strictly between us, sometimes the competition sees things that insiders miss. I'm curious if you've ever noticed anything irregular about Richardson Industries' recent growth. Julian's smile faded, replaced by a sharp, assessing look. He studied her for a long moment. That's a dangerous question to ask a competitor, Naomi. I'm looking for the truth, she replied, holding his gaze. No matter how ugly it is. 2 days later, they met in a diner far from the city center. Julian brought files, public records, bid histories, and market analysis that didn't add up. Your husband wins contracts he shouldn't, Julian explained. He undercuts prices in a way that should be mathematically impossible unless he's subsidizing the losses from somewhere else. Or unless he's cooking the books. I have access to his home office, Naomi said. I can get you internal documents. Can you tell me what they mean? I can, Julian promised. And so, the alliance was formed. Naomi became a spy in her own home. When Alexander was in the shower, she was copying hard drives. When he was asleep, she was photographing ledgers. She passed everything to Julian, who helped her interpret the data. But the financial rabbit hole went deeper than Julian could track alone. At his suggestion, Naomi hired Thomas Wu, a forensic accountant. Thomas was a quiet, meticulous man who looked at spreadsheets the way an artist looks at a canvas. It took Thomas 3 weeks to find the smoking gun. He's smart, Thomas told Naomi and Julian during a briefing in April. He's using a web of shell companies. Apex LLC, Blue Horizon Holdings, several in the Cayman Islands. He moves money out of Richardson Industries as consulting fees or vendor payments to these fake companies. Then, the money is routed back into his personal offshore accounts. How much? Naomi asked, bracing herself. Conservatively. Thomas adjusted his glasses. $12 million over the last 3 years. Likely closer to 15. He's embezzling from his own investors, his own board. Naomi felt a wave of nausea. She had known Alexander was a cheater. She hadn't realized he was a criminal. He's stealing from the company to fund his lifestyle, she said. And to fund someone else, Thomas added gently. He slid a separate sheet of paper across the table. I noticed recurring transfers from his personal account to a specific recipient. Then I noticed that recipient had her own set of irregularities. Naomi looked at the paper. It was a bank statement for a trust fund. Her father's family trust. The recipient is Brianna Richardson, Thomas said. But look at the source of funds entering her account. Some from Alexander. Yes. But here, these withdrawals. She's been pulling money out of your father's trust fund. Roughly $300,000 over 2 years. That's impossible, Naomi whispered. Dad controls that account. She forged his signature, Thomas said. I checked the handwriting. It's a clumsy forgery, but the bank didn't catch it. And look where the money goes immediately after she takes it. He pointed to a list of merchants. Poker Stars, BetMGM, Caesars Online. She's a gambler, Naomi realized, the pieces finally clicking into place. That's why she's always broke. That's why she needs Alexander. He's paying her debts. The betrayal had mutated. It wasn't just an affair anymore. It was a conspiracy. Her husband and her sister were partners in crime, literally and figuratively, stealing from everyone who loved them to feed their own greed and addictions. Naomi looked at Julian and Thomas. I have enough to divorce him, she said. But that's not enough anymore. I don't just want to leave him. I want to stop him. If you release this information, Julian warned, he goes to prison. The company collapses. It's the nuclear option. Naomi thought about the B. Richardson emails. She thought about her father's trust fund, drained by the daughter he doted on. She thought about the lies Alexander told her every single morning over coffee. "Prepare the files," Naomi said. "I want everything documented. Every cent. Every lie. I'm going to burn it all down." The hardest part wasn't the investigation. It was the acting. For 3 months, Naomi had to live with a man she despised. She had to let him kiss her goodbye in the morning. She had to sit next to him on the sofa and watch movies, pretending she didn't know he was texting her sister during the commercial breaks. Naomi became a master of compartmentalization. By day, she was the diligent nonprofit director and the loving wife. By night, or whenever she had a stolen moment, she was a general planning an invasion. She met with Helen Chung, a divorce attorney known for being a shark in silk clothing. "We need to time this perfectly," Helen advised. "If we file too early, he hides assets. If we wait too long, he might get suspicious. The element of surprise is your best weapon." "My birthday is July 10th, Naomi said. "He's planning a dinner at Maison Rouge. All his key investors will be there. My family will be there." Helen raised an eyebrow. "You want to do it then?" "Brianna is pregnant," Naomi said, her voice flat. Patricia, the investigator, had confirmed it weeks ago. She's planning to announce it at the dinner. She thinks it's going to be her big moment. Her victory lap. "And you want to interrupt it?" "I want to nuke it," Naomi corrected. The logistics of the plan were complex. Naomi had to coordinate with Thomas to get the financial dossiers printed and bound. She had to work with Patricia to get the surveillance photos of the affair organized. She had to secretly rent a new apartment, moving her most precious belongings, her grandmother's jewelry, her personal journals, her important documents, box by box, smuggling them out of the house in gym bags so Alexander wouldn't notice. There were close calls. One evening, Alexander came home early while Naomi was on the phone with the FBI contact Julian had helped her secure. She had to hang up mid-sentence and pretend she was ordering takeout. Another time, Brianna called her, weeping about stress at work, and Naomi had to comfort her, listening to her sister's lies while holding a report detailing Brianna's gambling losses. Late in June, 2 weeks before the birthday, Naomi had a moment of terrifying doubt. She was having lunch with her mother, who looked so happy, chattering about how nice it would be to have the whole family together. Am I a monster? Naomi wondered. I am about to break her heart. I am about to show her that both her daughters are flawed, one a thief, the other an executioner. You seem distant, Naomi, her mother said, reaching across the table to squeeze her hand. Is everything okay with you and Alexander? Naomi looked at her mother's kind, worried face. She almost broke. She almost confessed right there. But then she remembered the trust fund. She remembered that her mother's security was being siphoned away by the very person her mother was constantly defending. If Naomi didn't stop this, her parents could lose everything. Everything is fine, Mom, Naomi lied. I'm just thinking about the future. The night before the birthday dinner, Alexander asked her what she wanted for a gift. He was lying in bed, scrolling through his phone, probably texting Brianna. Surprise me, Naomi said, turning off the lamp. She lay in the dark, listening to him breathe. She felt a strange sense of detachment. The anger had burned itself out, leaving only a cold, hard resolve. Tomorrow, this bed would be empty. Tomorrow, this house would be a crime scene. Tomorrow she would be free. She went over the checklist in her mind one last time. Divorce papers filed? Checked. FBI notified? Checked. Evidence packets printed? Checked. Escape car ready? Checked. She closed her eyes and slept the sleep of the righteous. Walking out of Maison Rouge felt like stepping off a cliff and realizing she could fly. The cool night air hit Naomi's face, drying the sweat she hadn't realized was beading on her hairline. Beside her, Christina was vibrating with adrenaline. That was... Christina struggled for words as they walked rapidly toward the parking lot. That was the most intense thing I have ever witnessed. Did you see his face? Did you see Robert Chin's face? I saw, Naomi said. Her voice was steady, but her knees felt weak. The adrenaline dump was beginning. Her hands started to shake. Are you okay? Christina grabbed her arm, steadying her. I'm free, Naomi exhaled, the reality finally crashing into her. I'm actually free. They got into Christina's car. As they pulled out of the parking lot, Naomi looked back one last time. Through the large glass windows of the restaurant, she could see the chaos. Security guards were entering the private room. Alexander was gesturing wildly. Brianna was slumped over the table. It looked like a silent movie of a disaster. Naomi turned away. Drive. Please. They drove to Naomi's new apartment, a modern, secure condo in a part of the city Alexander rarely visited. Christina helped her carry the last few boxes inside. They ordered pizza and sat on the floor, drinking cheap wine, but the mood was somber. Naomi checked her phone. It was exploding. 47 missed calls. Alexander. Brianna. Dad. Alexander. 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 She turned the phone off. I can't talk to them tonight, she said. I said everything I needed to say in that room. You don't have to, Christina assured her. Tonight is for you. But sleep was difficult. Naomi lay in her new bed, staring at the unfamiliar ceiling. She kept replaying the look of betrayal on her father's face. Not betrayal by her, but betrayal by the truth she had revealed. She cried then, silent, hot tears that soaked into the pillow. She grieved for the family she had lost, even though she knew they were the ones who had destroyed it. The next morning, the world caught up. Naomi turned her phone on at 8 a.m. The news notifications flooded in first. Breaking. FBI raids Richardson Industries headquarters. Tech CEO Alexander Richardson under investigation for massive embezzlement. Socialite scandal. Birthday dinner ends in federal probe. It was real. It wasn't a nightmare. She had actually done it. Her phone rang. It was her mother. Naomi took a deep breath and answered. Naomi. Her mother's voice was ragged, as if she hadn't slept. Hello, Mom. Why? Her mother sobbed. Why did you do it like that? Why didn't you come to us privately? It was so cruel, Naomi. Humiliating your sister. Your husband. Mom, Naomi said, her voice firm. If I had come to you privately, would you have believed me? Silence. Would you? Naomi pressed. If I told you Brianna was stealing from the trust, would you have called the police? Or would you have covered for her? Would you have told me to be the bigger person and forgive her? She's your sister, her mother wept. She's pregnant. She slept with my husband for a year, Naomi said. She stole $300,000 from Dad. Those are crimes, Mom. Not mistakes. Crimes. We could have handled it as a family. I did handle it, Naomi said. I protected myself because nobody else was going to. I love you, Mom. But I'm not going to apologize for refusing to be a victim anymore. She hung up. It was the hardest thing she had ever done, setting that boundary. But as she looked around her clean, quiet apartment, she knew it was necessary. The toxicity of her old life was like a poison. She had to cut it out completely to survive. In the weeks that followed, the destruction of Alexander's life was absolute. The FBI investigation moved with terrifying speed, fueled by the dossier Naomi and Thomas Wu had provided. Alexander was arrested 3 days after the birthday dinner, marched out of his house in handcuffs while news helicopters circled overhead. His bail was set at $5 million. Money he didn't have, as the courts had frozen his assets. Brianna fared little better. While she wasn't arrested immediately, the family trust filed charges against her. A decision driven by Naomi's father, who had finally woken up to the reality of his youngest daughter's actions. One rainy Tuesday in August, Naomi was at the new office space for the Truth and Justice Foundation. The nonprofit Julian had helped her start to assist other women in financial crisis. She was reviewing case files when the receptionist buzzed her. "There's a Brianna Richardson here to see you. She says it's urgent." Naomi froze. She hadn't seen Brianna since the dinner. "Send her away," Naomi said instinctively. "She's refusing to leave, Ms. Richardson. She's quite emotional." Naomi sighed. She walked out to the lobby. Brianna was standing there, drenched from the rain, her pregnancy now visibly showing. She looked nothing like the glamorous woman in the green dress. She looked tired, pale, and desperate. "You have 5 minutes," Naomi said, leading her to a small conference room. She didn't offer her a seat. "I need help," Brianna blurted out the moment the door closed. "Mom and Dad cut me off. Alexander is in jail and won't take my calls. I have rent due. I have a baby coming in 2 months. I have nowhere to go." "You have a job?" Naomi asked coldly. "I can't get a job. I'm 6 months pregnant and I have pending fraud charges. Who's going to hire me?" Brianna started to cry, reaching out for Naomi's hand. "Naomi, please. I'm your sister. I made a mistake. A horrible mistake. But you can't let me starve." Naomi stepped back, avoiding Brianna's touch. "You didn't make a mistake, Brianna. You made 1,000 choices. You chose to lie. You chose to steal. You chose to sleep with my husband in my bed while I was at work. I was jealous." Brianna sobbed. "I wanted what you had. And now I'm paying for it, okay? Is that what you want to hear?" "I'm miserable." "I don't want to hear anything," Naomi said. "You're in this building, a building dedicated to helping women who have been betrayed, asking for help from the woman you betrayed. The audacity is staggering." "So you're just going to let me drown?" "I'm going to let you swim," Naomi corrected. "Figure it out, Brianna. Sell your designer clothes. Get a public defender. Ask the other guy, Derek Santos, for help." "Oh, does Alexander know about Derek? Or are you still lying to everyone?" Brianna's face went white. "How do you?" "I know everything," Naomi said. "Goodbye, Brianna." Naomi walked out of the room and instructed security to escort her sister out. She went back to her office and closed the door, her hands shaking slightly. It wasn't triumph she felt. It was just exhaustion. A week later, a letter arrived from prison. The handwriting was jagged, desperate. It was from Alexander. "Naomi, I know I have no right to ask you for anything. But Brianna is writing to me, saying the baby is mine, demanding money I don't have. I need to know the truth. You investigated us. Is the child mine? Please. I have nothing left but this question." Naomi read the letter twice. She thought about the paternity timeline Patricia had given her. It was a toss-up. It could be Alexander's. It could be Derek's. She took a pen and a piece of foundation stationery. She wrote one sentence. "That is not my problem to solve." She sealed the envelope and dropped it in the outgoing mail. She was done carrying their burdens. She had a foundation to run. She had women to help. Women who actually deserved it. 1 year later. The Chicago skyline was bathed in the warm glow of a setting sun. On the rooftop terrace of the Truth and Justice Foundation, a celebration was underway. It was Naomi's 36th birthday, but it looked nothing like the dinner at Maison Rouge. There were no crystal chandeliers, no hushed waiters, no undercurrent of dread. Instead, there were string lights, pizzas from the best spot in the city, and beer in coolers. The guests were a mix of old friends like Christina, new staff from the foundation, and Julian. Naomi stood by the railing, looking out at the city. She had cut her hair into a sharp, chic bob. She wore a simple white sundress. She felt lighter, as if she had shed a heavy skin. The past year had been a whirlwind. The foundation had exploded in popularity after Naomi's story, carefully anonymized, had gone viral. They had helped over 300 women untangle their finances from abusive partners. Naomi had testified before a Senate committee on financial fraud in marriage. She had found a purpose that burned brighter than her old career ever had. Alexander had been sentenced 2 months ago, 15 years in federal prison. The jury hadn't been swayed by his defense. He was gone, erased from her life except for the signature on the divorce papers. Brianna was working as a receptionist at a dental office, living in a small studio apartment. She had given birth to a baby girl. Naomi hadn't met her niece, and she was at peace with that. Her parents were slowly, painfully learning to respect Naomi's boundaries, understanding that family didn't mean unconditional acceptance of abuse. "Penny, for your thoughts?" Julian appeared beside her, handing her a plastic cup of wine. He had been her rock through the chaos, steady, patient, and kind. They had started dating 3 months ago, taking it slow. It was a relationship built on transparency, not performance. "I was just thinking," Naomi said, smiling at him, "about my wish last year." "Oh." Julian raised an eyebrow. "What did you wish for?" "I wished for the truth," Naomi said. "I thought the truth would destroy me. I thought blowing up my life would leave me with nothing." She turned to look at the party behind her. She saw Christina laughing with the foundation's lead attorney. She saw women who had come to them broken and were now standing tall. She saw a life that was honest, messy, and real. "And?" Julian asked. "And I was wrong," Naomi said. "The truth didn't destroy me. It cleared the way." She looked back at the city. Somewhere out there, Alexander was sitting in a cell. Somewhere, Brianna was struggling to pay bills. They were living in the ruins they had created. But Naomi? Naomi was building a skyscraper. "You know what the best revenge is?" Naomi asked, leaning her head on Julian's shoulder. "Tell me," he said. "It's not prison," she said softly. "It's not bankruptcy. It's this. It's being happy. It's waking up every morning without a knot in my stomach. It's building a life that is so good, so full, that their absence doesn't even matter anymore." Julian kissed her forehead. "To a good life, then." Naomi raised her plastic cup. "To truth," she said. "And to justice." She drank the wine, laughing as a firework from a distant stadium lit up the sky. She wasn't the victim of the story anymore. She wasn't even the vengeful wife. She was just Naomi. And for the first time in a long time, that was more than enough. If you liked the story, please subscribe and hit the like button. Thanks for watching.